when you hear all of the opportunities out there, it also raises the question of how can you sift through all of this and say, I want to invest in either infrastructure or service industries, and then drill down into the service industries and so on. And I will maybe talk to my good friend Hubert to see how we might create a kind of a online portal where we can capture some of these things. And we at the Global Publishers Forum have been thinking about creating some kind of a platform where it'll make it easier just to put stuff on the platform and say, I can pick and choose what kind of investments. And talking about investments, and I'm so pleased, Carlos, you raised the point of come and invest in Africa. The African Development Bank focuses on that issue, provides a lot of critical infrastructure financing, and in fact, almost like startup financing as well on occasion. So we are delighted to have Mr. Asamoah here. Thank you for your patience. It's good to have you back. So welcome back. Please, I know you'll speak from there, so please do. Thank you. Yep, I can hear it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is it on?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. And I actually think that Mr. Lopez is one of my favorite speakers, so I'm very happy to allow him to speak first. He makes my life easier because he's always articulate and gets to the point. My name is Solomon Asamoah. I'm the Vice President at the Africa Development Bank, responsible for infrastructure, private sector, and regional integration. My job here today is to talk a little bit about the bank's commitments to the MDGs, but also to talk about how the bank is itself transforming and moving forward as an institution to partner to try and promote and implement and execute Africa's development. I think in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, the bank has been obviously very much involved in that as a development finance institution. Over $30 billion of financing directly over the last 15 years. And we support the agenda, we support the items, and we really want to continue that support both in terms of financing, policy, advocacy, support, etc. What I wanted to spend a few my time speaking about, and I know we're running late of time, so I'll be quite brief. We've recently elected a new president of the African Development Bank, and he has really highlighted 5 new agenda items for the bank. And I think it's worthwhile just going through those and talking a little bit about those because they really capture the essence of the issues and what we're trying to do to move them forward. So it comes into five categories. Light up Africa, or Power Africa, feed itself, integrate Africa, industrialize Africa, and improve the quality of life for people on the ground. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those and their importance and how we propose to try and make a difference. On the first priority, he's made this his #1 priority, which is really power and light up Africa. And I think this is critical on a number of ways. Firstly, it's very, very hard, as I always say, to develop in the dark. So if the continent is going to develop, it needs the energy and the light. And the power also allows us to do all the other things that we want to try and do. Access to affordable and reliable energy sources really is the bedrock or the foundation through which we can move forward. So the president announced what he called the New Deal on Energy. And this is really 2 very high strategic goals that we're aiming for. First is to have 80% access by 2025, and then to have full access by 2030. And when he announced those aims, a lot of people looked at him saying, he's a naive new president, he'll calm down in a while. And then he made a very interesting statement, I thought. He said 2 things. First of all, he said to me, the Africa Development Bank was not established to do small things. And secondly, he said, we've collectively allowed ourselves to get into the rut where we actually believe lighting up our continent is not achievable. And it's just not true. It's actually very achievable. And so with those focus, we're approaching the energy and the power sector quite differently. We had a high-level conference last week in Abidjan, where at relatively short notice of less than 2 weeks, we invited many, many people around the globe to come to us and just have a frank discussion about the power situation in the African continent. Over 150 people came, high-level people, which really was a testament, not so much to the African Development Bank, but to me it was a testament to the importance and the willingness to be part of the solution that exists around the globe to solve Africa's power crisis. So what we're going to do is the African Development Bank, and we made it very clear that there are many, many different initiatives. There are many people working on the power sector across Africa. We're not going to even attempt to try and replicate that. But what we're going to do is to try and work with as many partners as we can to coordinate so that our effort is more concrete and is more sustainable. Each individual institution or people, and there probably many of you here in the audience who have worked on the power sector in Africa, have come across a roadblock or one or two roadblocks. You've been trying to push and you hit something and you can't move it. Well, maybe 2 or 3 other different people have that particular solution, and maybe you have the solution for somebody else. So I think we have to coordinate, pull our resources together. The unique role that the African Development Bank has, as all of our countries in Africa are shareholders of the African Development Bank, we do have an access and ability to talk to our governments and to support our governments, those that want to do the right thing, with practical advice as well as resources. So we want to play that coordinating role because really, as I said, you can't really develop as Africa if we don't have access to power. Second thing on the feed itself agenda for the African Development Bank, and I won't have to repeat many of the statistics and the points just made by Mr. Lopez and other people, the importance of agriculture sector to Africa. And again, anybody who looks at it, looks at the sector, knows that most of our, or a large proportion of our produce gets wasted during harvest times. There's very little technology involved in the sector. And to the extent that Africa is now a net importer of food, which is quite scandalous if you think about it. So again, we have to make a new approach. We have to introduce the uses of technology. We have to introduce better uses of irrigation. We also have to, and this is the bedrock, which is the infrastructure and our ports development, and then use the issues of power to be able to power all of these things. The idea, I was actually at a panel during Obama's trip to Kenya. I was with the ambassador on the same panel. And one of the things that we recognize in the agriculture sector is that if we can make agriculture sexy for young people to want to get involved in it, then we're probably 80% of the way there. If we can get young people from the cities, all coming out of university, saying to themselves, I want to develop a career in agriculture, then it means that we probably would have cracked something. So I don't think young people are very interested in using basic tools to go and dig ground. So we have to use technology, we have to use advance. And I think that's an area that we're going to make a major push with our partners as well. The integration of Africa, integrate Africa, I think many speakers just spoke to that, so I don't need to repeat it. But the importance of having larger markets to be able to attract financing, the importance of having the freer movements of goods and people, and the importance of having greater cross-border investments between African countries as opposed to just relying on external financing are going to really move things forward. So what we have to do, we have to look at the barriers that are preventing regional integration and economic activity. I have 2 pictures which I sometimes show. The first picture is of a dilapidated road with potholes, and there's a big lorry and it's fallen over because it's got trapped in a pothole. This is obviously a problem, and it's an infrastructure problem. Then I show a second slide, which is of this great 5-lane motorway, perfect surface for miles, with no traffic on it, perfect road. And then you see along the side a line of lorries going back a mile, all trapped at the border. That's not an infrastructure problem, but that is what's preventing a lot of regional integration to be done efficiently. So we have to look at those barriers to integration as well. The policy environment, the regulatory environment, the corruption, all of those issues which also prevent regional integration from happening. Fourth, on industrialization, I don't need to say anything, Carlos Lopez said it. Very, very few regions, if any, have developed without industrializing. And we have actually the ingredients now for Africa to make a major push over the next few decades. The demographics of Africa are right. I heard an interesting statement the other day. I don't know if it's true, so don't quote me, but I think it captures the point. By 2060, 50% of all young people in the world will be in Africa. So if you're a global business looking for a global strategy, does it make sense not to be part of that and have a strategy for Africa? So I think the opportunities and the young people for Africa to take advantage, once we have the stable power, once we have produced some of the basic infrastructure to industrialize and manufacture, has never been greater. And that's an area that we need to focus on. And then finally, on the quality of life issue, I mean, there's only one thing I need to say about that. I think we all have to work towards eliminating this shameful thing that we see, which is a bit of an indictment on all of the continent, of these people risking everything across the Sahara, across the Mediterranean, to do anything they can to get out of Africa. I think it's an indictment that we haven't created the environment at home. So we're going to make a major push on that particular area as well, youth jobs, and making sure that we actually create the environment at home that attracts people. So bottom line, no single institution can solve all of these problems, but collectively we can make a huge difference. And the other thing that's realized now, and it's not just a talking point anymore, it's reality. The governments have realized that they cannot do it without the private sector. So they're busy putting conditions to be able to leverage financing for the private sector. So all of these problems that we have is actually an investment opportunity on the continent. You can actually make good returns and make a difference. And we're happy to work with anybody interested to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Solomon. Really appreciate what you've said. Solomon, so if people want to see what kind of projects you're working and supporting, can they get that from your website?
Yep, afdb.org.
Very good. Thank you. That's very helpful. I talked early on about kind of an online resource. So it's premature, but I just want to give you a URL. You might want to look at it maybe in another week's time. It's called sdgsonline.org. sdgsonline.org. We're putting out a prototype. It's purely a prototype at this point. The idea is to capture projects from around the world. Barbara says to me that I must ask 10 questions from people, but I hope you'll forgive me if I don't ask any questions, because the next round of speakers, and Hubert is pulling his hair out, whatever there is. So, yeah, Hubert, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here with you. Thank you. It's a privilege to partner with the Africa Investor and the team. And I want to thank our distinguished panelists here for sharing their ideas, and we look forward to having you back again. So, thank you very much indeed.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.